Alright, General Electric GP9 Locomotive Operation Manual, Section 4, Cooling, Lubricating Oil, Fuel, and Air System, Cooling System, the systematic with the flow diagram of the engine running system, and Figure 4.1 with the wheel is circulated through the cooling system, two central figure pump, type pumps mounting on the front end of the engine. When water drained from the engine, cooling water tank with the oil cooled with the pump that is full with the engine dying through with the radiator with the wire is cooled with the after leave of the radiator with the water flow with the oil cooler, then into the suction side of the pump that calls the cycle. The repeat with the radiator of the made up of the two tank banks, each bank with a consist of the 5 radiator section water leaving from the engine center when the radiator is divided into the right hand and left bank of the radiator section, and each bank with the 2 with the radiator section located with the cap at the end of the long hood of the 3 radiator section located with the open opposite end of the long hood of the front rear of the radiator section with each of the bank of the tank with the reward manifold for cooling the air through the fin to the radiator with the section control with the shutter of the 4 AC driven and cooling fan with the operation of the fan shove with the automatic with the exemption of the one set with the shutters adjusted to the cab which are manually controlled with the cab heater operation. When the fans are operated with the air fools of the radiator with the protection from the discharge of the root with the car body, the 4 AC driven cooling fans are mounted to the roof of the long hood above the radiator section 2 with the fans controlled with the cooling air with the roof of the cab and radiator, and it shows the lubricating oil and W and water section, each bank with the 2 fans mounted on the other end of the long hood with the controlling the cool air through the rear bank for the radiator section of the fans are with the number 1 through 4, bringing with the number 1 fan located nearest to the cab end of the long hood. Shutters for the located on each side of the long hood of the below with the front rear of the bank radiator banks. Shutter the closest of the cab manually controlled with the lever located in the cab on each side of the electrical control cab and the shutter of the U with the control of the cab temperature that should normally be closed. Cab heaters are in operate with the shutter of the control airflow through the number 2 cooling fan opens with the automatic electric pneumatic control within the number 2 cooling fan and start with the shutter control air flow with the number 3 and 4 with the cooling fans are open automatically within the 4 cooling fan and start with the manual cutout with the switch for the cutout with the number 1 cooling fan located with the rear wall of the cab. The number 1 cooling fan must be cut out when the cab heaters are in operate for the operation switch for the cab control with the temperature for the operating switch with the figure 4 2 with the temperature for the control switch set close open various engine water temperature for the close of the operation AC with the contact with the close of the AC contactor shut with the perspective of the cooling fan with the temperature control switches are set close with the AC control with the file with the temperature for the control switch for approximately 10 degrees Fahrenheit below the setting. AC1 and the AC1 cools at 165 degrees fan will operate number 1 cooling fan cutout switch for the on. AC3 closes at 168 degrees Fahrenheit. AC4 closes at 171 degrees Fahrenheit. Show to the control of the airflow through number 3 and 4 fan also open. AC2 with closes at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. Show to the control airflow through the number 2 fan also opens, and then it shows you the GP9 engine water temperature control. 1 is the engine temperature control switch. 2 with the air differential adjustment. 3 is the range adjustment. 4 is the AC fan contactor. 400 operating water level. The operating water level to with the water tank with next to the water level. The side glass indicated with the minimum maximum water level. The engine running and stop with the engine should be never the operated with the water below with the low level of the water to level the figure 4-3 with the progressively with the lowering with the water of the gauge class of the indicate with the water leak from the cooling system should be reported. Figure 401 filling cooling system with the fill with the roof of the filler pipe located on the roof of the locomotive above the water tank through the filler pipe with either side of the locomotive and show the figure 4-3. Show the cooling water level to fill the system proceed as well with the step 5 through 8 necessary for the wheel filling the dry or nearly dry engine. One stop engine open G valve fill slowly until the water falls runs out with the G valve with the drain pipe 4 close with the G valve 5. So the engine runs several minutes. This will eliminate air pack with the system 6 stop engine open the G valve with the add water until it runs the G valve the drain pipe with close with the G valve. If the cooling system of a hot engine has been drained, but do not refill with the immediately with the cold water. If this is done with the sun change with the temperature might crack the wrap, the warp, the cylinder and liners and head. Caution 1, do not attempt to fill the cooling system through the drain pipe located underneath the locomotive. The system should not be filled above the maximum water level indicated on the water tank to prevent freezing when the radiators and whenever the engine shut down, the loss of the rust inhibited with the drain with back to the G level, the water level, the 402 with the drain with the cooling system, the entire cooling system drain with the drain valve, with the floor with the front with the engine with the explanation, assumption with the water trapped in the water pump with the right hand side with the engine drain with the right hand water pump with the open with the drain bottom with the water pumping hose. 403, cab heating and ventilation cut away with the GP9 heating and ventilation system shown with the folded illustration on the reverse side of the wiring diagram at the end of the manual. Operate with the cab heating system, play for the number 1 cooling fan, cutout switch to the opposition, club with the manually controlled flooding shutters, move the manual shut with the control lever on each of the electrical cabinet, close the position, adjust the individual cab heater motor speed with the turning with the cab heater with the selector with the switch 1 with its 3 position low, medium, and full to the side with the outside with the air coming through the number 1 cooling fan, opening with the draw through the radiator section adjacent with the cab heater below. This is heated air then forced from the cab through the cab heater with the inlet air duct with the cab heater with the independent each of the over the direction with the flow of the warm air to the fireman's side with the cab the other direction with the flow for the warm air with the engineer's cab side of the cab with the recirculate with the return air through the perforated cab ceiling returning air duct with the radiator section adjacent to the cab. The defroster is simple and non-adjustable valve with the arrangement directing the air supply valve with the cab heater with the blower with the front and rear cab window with the temperature with the incoming air supply with the cab heater blow with the can be varied with the A with the varying speed with the cab heater with the motor B valve adjusting with the opening with the manually operated shutters or opening with the shutters well with the cold outside air to mix with the heated air passing through the number 1 radiator section. Operate with the cab ventilating system to play for the cab heater with the motor switching off position. Place the number 1 cab cooling fan cutout switch on the position of the engine water temperature with 165 degrees the higher with the number 1 cooling fan will start. While the number 1 cooling fan in the operation cab with the air with the exhaust of the cab perforated ceiling and return with the air duct with the amount of the air being exhausted with the cab with the number 1 cooling fan can be varied by varying winning manually operated shut of the maximum cab ventilation contained with these shutters is closed. Lubricating oil system schematic with the diagram. Lubricating oil system shown figure 4. 1 oil under pressure with the over through with the engine lubricating piston cooling with the positive displacement combination piston cooling. Lubricating oil pump with the after circulation of the engine with the lubricating oil drain with the engine of the oil pan. Some with the positive displacement scavenging oil pump with the draw of the oil from and some forces to the filter with the end the oil cooler with the oil with the oil is delivered to the oil stream and some with the ready to the recirculate with the combination piston cooling. Lubricating oil pump. Some of the scavenging oil pumps deliver the greater quality with the oil to the stream than is required by the lubricating oil piston cooling pump with except for the oil return to the oil supply pan sump. Relief valve is built within the filter ordered to pass the passage of oil stream in excess of the capacity of the oil filter elements. Relief is off of the mount on the left side with the accuracy with the end of the accessory of the end of the engine with the valve is located with the discharge side with the lubricating oil pump with the purpose of the valve is to limit the maximum pressure of lube oil entering lube oil entering from the engine oil lube oil system approximately 60 pounds. 404 oil level. The oil level should be checked with the figure 404 with the engine hot engine with the running idle with speed with the dipstick should show with the low between low and the full. Figure 4 and 5 with the dipstick low counting on each of the engine stop with the oil with the filter with the cooler with the drain back in the oil pan. If the oil level is checked with the engine stopped, the reading on the dipstick will be above the full mark. 5. Adding oil to the system. Oil can be added with the engine running stop. When engine oil is added to the system, it must be poured in through the opening of the heavy square covered with the figure 4-6. On the top of the housing, while with the round cap with the remove of the engine running with the hot oil with under pressure will come through the opening with a possible cause of the private personal injury. Stand supporting the oil pressure maximum fill oil pressure 835 pounds, normal 40-50 pounds, should be not drop below 20 pounds idle with the pressure should be at least 6 pounds with the event with the dangerously low oil pressure the engine automatically will stop action with the governor by low oil pressure button and then 4 oil pressure for lubricating oil figure 4 7 of the mounted on the equipment. Fuel oil system. Schematic diagram of the fuel oil system shown figure 4A. The fuel drum with the storage tank with the roof with the deduction side with the dual filter, dual fuel filter by with the motor driven type of the fuel pump with the pump with the full fuel is forced cyclically through the pressure side with the dual fuel filter centered bronze filter after the passing through the double element centered bronze filter. Filter the fuel to the injector excessive fuel, excessive fuel not to the injector return of the fuel tank through the return fuel site glass around with the centered bronze filter housing the hour filter restrict the fuel flow into the glass cover with the slight back with the back pressure of the fuel with the injector maintaining the slight back pressure of the injector the positive supply of the fuel to the injectors, the share of the fuel dump with the delivery of more fuel with the engine, the burner with the tone of the excessive fuel circulated through the injectors, is used with the cooling, lubricating with the fine working parts of the injector. 15-pound relief valve is built and around with the pressure of the dual fuel filter with the right leaf with the bypass fuel to the center. Bronze filter element within pressure side with the dual filter becomes clogged. 407, the fuel sight glass mounted in the center of the bronze filler, even the 2-sight glass figure 409 for property engine that operates for the good flow of the fuel, clear free of bubble that indicate the sight glass nearest the engine called the fuel return sight glass. No fuel shown in the fuel return sight glass. Check to see if the fuel pump motor is running. If the motor is running, no fuel is flowing in the return sight glass. Check A, fuel supply in the fuel tank. B, position of the emergency fuel cutoff valve. C, with the clogged suction filter, and D, suction leak in sight glass is showing 409 with the return sight glass and 45-pound sight glass. And piping tank in between the pump and the broken and slipping coupling at the fuel pump. If the fuel pump motor is stopped, to check with the control of the fuel pump. The circuit breaker must be on. The fuel pump circuit breaker electrical cabinet must be on. The control knife switch must be closed. The main battery switch must be closed. And E, the loose fuel pump motor cable connection. A centered bronze filter clipped with a 45-pound relief valve with the sight glass. The figure 409, the sight glass referred to as a 45-pound sight glass, normally empty. When the more trickle with the fuel and 45-pound sight glass indicates that the relief valve is open. The fuel will pass through the 45-pound sight glass with the relief valve with the bypass through the engine return of the fuel tank with the case of the center bronze filter being clogged. 408, filling the fuel tank. The fuel tank fills with either side of the locomotive. The fuel side from the short side of the level of your gauge with the located with the next to fuel filter with the fuel gauge that indicates fuel level at the top of the barrel with 4.5 inches below the top of the tank, but it should be observed with the filling of the tank to prevent overflowing. Do not handle fuel oil near any open flame. 409, fuel gauge. The basic fuel capacity with the 800 gallons fuel length with the sight of the gauges are located on each side of the front end of the fuel tank. These gauges indicate the level of the fuel tank below with the low level of the short fuel filler gauge. 410, emergency fuel cutoff switch for the emergency fuel cutoff figure. 410, with the cutoff of the fuel supply fuel pump with the vent of the fire and emergency. It is located inside of the compartment of the lower front center of the fuel tank on each side of the locomotive. The small box, the lift cover, the clove of the box, the pull, the ring, end of the cable, the running of the fuel control valve. The similar ring is located in the cab of the locomotive. The fuel cutoff valve with the trip of the pulling any of these three rings. The trip of the valve must be reset manually. Reset of the valve, push from the right extent of the valve compartment of the right side of the locomotive. The show of the fuel tank, the push in, reset, the set position, trip position. Air system. Compressed air that's not only for the diesel locomotive, the operating air brake, the change, but the essential for the proper operation. Many of the other items, reverse switch for the main power, with the contact with the cover of the operating cylinder, horn, bell, and venter. Horn, bell, and windshield wipers are also air operated. Some of these items mentioned are merely electrical and pneumatic valve. The list of the means of the air. Such a case, flow air through the valve with the control of the electrical circuits. Your air compressor. Each locomotive power plant is basically completely air-cooled 3-cylinder 2-stage compressor. Figure 411. The air compressor driven in flexible coupling from the front end of the engine with a crankshaft. The compressor has only its own oil pump with the pressure lubricating oil system of the engine stop with the level of compressor for the crankcase with the chain with the band the type gauge for the L speed with the 275 RPM with the compressor crankcase oil hot. The lubricating oil pressure should be approximately 10 to 20 pounds. Compressor consists of two low pressure cylinders, one high pressure cylinder, the piston with the 3-cylinder driven, the common crankshaft with the 2 level low pressure cylinders are set at the angle of the vertical high test pressure cylinder. Air from the low pressure cylinder goes into the intercooler of the radiator for the cooled. 4 engine with the high pressure cylinder. The intercooler provides with the pressure gauge of the relief valve. The gauge normally reads approximately 40-50% pounds within the compressor is low. The intercooler relief valve is set at 65 pounds. Aiming the marked deviation of the intercooler pressure for the 45 to 50 pounds should be reported to all at maintenance terminal with all oil separated with the discharge of the airline with high pressure cylinder for filter oil drops over the carbon particles out of the air. Drain valve is provided with the drain with the oil separator and should be drained once. Each screw chain with a regular maintenance period. Also recommend the drain with the compressor for the intercooler with the 2 drain valve with the provided with the bottom of the header of the main reservoir drain with the compressor oil separated with the prevent moisture from the dirt from being carried into the air brake, air electrical control, air system compressor control. So for the air compressor for the direct for the connect with the engine for the compressor for the continue with the operation, although not always pumping air whenever the engine is run with the unloader piston with the provided head and with the high and low pressure cylinder which cuts off with the compressing action when actuated by the air compressor for the governor control with the unloader accomplished for the blocking with the intake valve with the high and low pressure cylinder. When the air operating under the load is cut off with the underload, relieve the intake valve with the compressor and resume with the pump with the main reserve air pressure of the D with the accumulate actuate with the underload valves. 2 minutes with the compressor governor controller of the pneumatic governor control with the 2 with the electro-pneumatic governor control. On the locomotive pneumatic governor control system, figure 412, each for the air compressor that operates individual component without regard for the main reservoir demands of the other units. For the consider the main reservoir air pressure reaches 140 pounds, with the governor cuts out with the air compressor for the emitting air to the unloader valves, emitting air to the unloader. Show the pneumatic governor control system. The compressor underloaded, manual unloaded, normal, manual loaded for main reserve. Then it shows a electromagnetic governor control system switch, 64 from the fuel switch, compressor control switch, compressor relay, 64 battery, main air reservoir, 130 pounds, main air reservoir, trailing reservoir above the 130 pounds, air compressor, unloader valves, air intake, unloader valves, lead unit, magnet valves, compressor control valves from main reserve, compressor valve, cables between units, and then valve will hold the intake valve with something with the compressor action. The compressor remain with unload until the main reservoir pressure valve between 130 psi of the governor cuts into the air compressor at the top of the air supply with the unloader valve releasing the intake of the valve with the compressor resuming pumping. If all electrical units, if all the units of the locomotive consist of equipped electromagnetic, if the compressor for the governor control figure 413 with the electrical arrangement of all the compressor for the locomotive, the synchronized with the pump of the air into the respective main reservoir. When the main reservoir pressure is at 1 over the drop of the 130 pound with the air pressure for the reservoir reach with the 140 with the compressor will unload each of the unit with the equipped for the compressor control with the switch for the actuated main reservoir pressure for the compressor magnet valve, the compressor relay, compressor control valve, and then runs through out of the locomotive to connect with the compressor relay with each of the unit parallel. Electromagnetic governor control of the locomotive with the equipment rack with the gas support with the water supply with the tank of the oil cool with the machine with the filter with the assembly. Figure 414 compressor with the control switch well made with the control with a single point with a double throw switch that is strong with the loaded with the position with the main reservoir pressure that drops 130 pounds or unloaded position with the main reservoir pressure reach with the 140 pound with the loaded position of the CCS because of the compressor control magnet valve to be energized over the allowing the air to flow over the passive the valve with the compressor unloaded position stop with the compressing action and if the in the loaded position, CCS brake within the strip of the compressor control magnet valve within the unit that causes the current to flow with the CC wire energizing CR relays in each unit. The CR relay energizes into the interlocking between brake circuit with the compressor control magnet valve. Regardless position with the CCS in that unit braking the circuit with the air compressor the control magnet valve shuts off the supply of the air. The compressor is unloaded position piston compressor resumes pumping. Alright, 413, manual underload valve. A three-way valve with a figure 412 or 414 is provided in this kit with the desire to keep the air compressor unloaded respectively with the compressor control system raised to T. Show the compressor underload valve with the CCS, the main reservoir pressure, the CC magnet valve, normal manual underload, normal opposition closed, and then from main reserve the normal open position. That's electromagnetic governor controller. Pattern of the face valve with indicate the flow air through the valve. The valve is normally positioned with a direct air supply with the underload through the air compressor for governor control, manually unloaded. Air compressor for the turn valve with the bypass main reservoir air supply with underload valves are our compressor governor control. 414, draining the air system. The air system should be drained periodically to prevent moisture from being carried into the air brake electrical control air system. The frequency of the drain, with depending on the local condition, will be determined by the practice of the recommended with the drain. With the done, it's the time with each screw chain with a definite schedule that can be determined in the individual railroad. Section 5, electrical equipment.